Marcus Reynolds didn't give the woman at the bus stop a second thought the first day he saw her. By the fifth day, her tears had become impossible to ignore. What he discovered about her would not only save her from financial ruin, but bring life back to a town he'd long stopped believing in, and to his own fractured heart. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The city bus rolled to a stop at the corner of Maple and Chestnut, its brakes hissing in the crisp autumn air. Marcus Reynolds glanced at his watch, 7:42 a.m., 3 minutes behind schedule. After 14 years driving the same route through Riverbrook, he could feel the rhythm of the town through the steering wheel, could predict which passengers would be running late, which would have exact change, which would fall asleep before reaching their stop. He knew every pothole on Route 16 and could tell you exactly which streetlight would turn yellow just as he approached it. The perfect routine for a man who had spent the last 5 years avoiding surprises. "Morning, Mr. Reynolds," called Denny, a freckle-faced kid with a skateboard tucked under his arm. "Giants got crushed last night." Marcus nodded, offering a slight smile. "Still early in the season, Denny." Marcus had once been the kind of man who would have spent 20 minutes debating last night's game. That was before Emily, before the medical bills, before becoming a single father to Lily, who was now 12 and wise beyond her years. As the passengers filed in, Marcus caught a glimpse of the woman through his side mirror. She sat alone on the bench, shoulders hunched, face partially obscured by a curtain of auburn hair. What caught his attention wasn't her worn beige coat or the leather portfolio clutched against her chest, but the way she quickly wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. She wasn't just tired, she was crying. The woman didn't board his bus that morning or the next, but she was there every day at 7:42 a.m., sitting on the same bench, staring across at the old Millstone building, always with that portfolio, always with those silent tears. On the fifth day, as Marcus pulled up to the stop, the wind picked up. October in Riverbrook meant the maples turned brilliant crimson, and their leaves danced across Main Street in sudden gusts. A page escaped from the woman's portfolio, and she lunged to catch it, scrambling as it fluttered toward the gutter. Marcus didn't think twice. He secured the bus, called "back in a sec" to his passengers, and stepped onto the sidewalk. The paper had lodged against a storm drain, and he retrieved it just as the woman reached him, breathless. "Thank you," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the redness around her eyes. Up close, he noticed her face was delicately lined. Around the eyes and mouth, not young but striking. Her eyes were a clear hazel that reminded him of the river after rainfall. "No problem." Marcus handed her the paper, catching a glimpse of what looked like property boundaries and surveyor's marks. "You okay? You've been out here all week." She stiffened slightly. "I'm fine. Just thinking." In the cold, crying. She tucked the paper back into her folder. "You've been watching me? Hard not to notice when someone's at your stop every day but never gets on." A horn honked, and Marcus turned to see Mrs. Garfield gesturing impatiently from her seat on the bus. He raised a hand in acknowledgement. "You should go," the woman said. "Your passengers are waiting." Marcus hesitated, then pulled a card from his pocket, the one with his name and the transit authority contact information. "Marcus Reynolds. If you ever want to actually ride the bus instead of just watching it, first trip on me." A ghost of a smile crossed her face as she accepted the card. Alexandra Harlow. The name hit Marcus like a physical force. Harlow, as in Harlow Estate, as in the family that had once owned half the commercial property in town, including the shuttered mill that had employed his father for 30 years. The mill closed without warning when Marcus was in high school, sending Riverbrook into an economic tailspin it had never fully recovered from. "You're a Harlow?" he asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Her eyes flicked to his face, registering his change in tone. "Yes," she said simply, then perhaps seeing something in his expression, "but probably not the kind you're thinking of." Before he could respond, the bus horn blared again. "You should go," she repeated. Marcus nodded and returned to his bus, pulling away from the curb with a strange tightness in his chest. In the rear-view mirror, he watched Alexandra Harlow sit back down on the bench, her eyes not on the bus, but fixed once more on the abandoned millstone building across the street. That evening, as Marcus heated leftover spaghetti for Lily, his mind kept returning to Alexandra Harlow. The Harlows had vanished from Riverbrook 20 years ago, after closing the mill and selling most of their holdings to a development company that had promised revitalization but delivered nothing but vacant storefronts. "Dad, you're burning the garlic bread." Marcus startled out of his thoughts to find smoke rising from the toaster oven. "Shoot," he muttered, grabbing an oven mitt. Lily sighed dramatically, pushing her long brown hair behind her ears, a gesture so like her mother it sometimes stole his breath. "What's going on? You've been weird since you got home." "Nothing's weird," Marcus insisted, scraping the blackened edges of the bread. "Just distracted." "Uh-huh." Lily crossed her arms, looking skeptical. At 12, she'd already mastered the art of seeing through his half-truths. Girl problems. Marcus nearly dropped the bread. "What? No. Why would you—" "Mrs. Peterson from next door said she saw you talking to a pretty redhead today." Marcus sighed. The Riverbrook grapevine remained undefeated. Mrs. Peterson needs a hobby that isn't staring out her window all day. So there was a pretty redhead? There was a passenger who needed help with something, that's all. Marcus set the slightly charred bread on the table. How was school? Lily allowed the subject change, launching into a story about her science project. But Marcus knew the reprieve was temporary. Once Lily got curious about something, she was like a detective with a new case. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus found himself at his computer, typing Alexandra Harlow into the search bar. The results were sparse. A few references to charity events in Portland from several years back, a mention in an article about historic preservation. Nothing that explained why a Harlow would be sitting at a bus stop in Riverbrook, crying while staring at a derelict building. The next morning was Saturday, his day off. Marcus dropped Lily at her friend's house for a sleepover, then found himself driving downtown, past the bus stop where he'd first noticed Alexandra. He told himself he was just going to check if the farmer's market still had any of those apple cider donuts Lily loved. The bench was empty, of course. It was nearly noon, not 7:42 a.m. Marcus parked and walked toward the market, but his eyes kept drifting to the millstone building across the street. The once grand 4-story brick structure had been the centerpiece of downtown Riverbrook. Now, its windows were boarded, the ornate entrance wrapped in chain-link fencing plastered with "no trespassing" signs. "It's a shame, isn't it?" Marcus turned to find Mayor Richardson beside him, following his gaze to the building. In his 60s, with a permanent campaign smile and a comb-over that fooled no one, Richardson had been mayor since the mill closed, promising, every 4 years, to bring jobs back to Riverbrook. "Richardson." Marcus nodded politely. "Yeah, it is." "Quite a surprise when Ms. Harlow showed up in my office last week," Richardson continued, watching Marcus carefully. After all these years, Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Oh? Seems she's inherited quite a bit of the old Harlow properties. Claims she's got plans." Richardson chuckled. "Though between you and me, I think she's in over her head. The bank's been patient because of the Harlow name, but patience only goes so far." "What kind of plans?" Marcus asked, despite himself. "Community revitalization, sustainable business incubation, all the trendy buzzwords." Richardson waved a dismissive, "And nothing that's going to bring real industry back. I tried to make her see the reason about selling to Westfield Development. They've got cash on the table, Plans for a big box store. Jobs, Marcus. Real jobs. Marcus frowned. Westfield Development had been circling Riverbrook for years, promising jobs while delivering minimum wage positions and driving local shops out of business in neighboring towns. Anyway, Richardson clapped him on the shoulder. Heard you two. Met. Thought you should know what you're dealing with. The Harlows never really cared about this town. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I imagine. As Richardson walked away, Marcus found himself looking back at the Millstone building with new eyes. What exactly was Alexandra Harlow trying to accomplish? And why was she alone at a bus stop every morning crying about it? The questions followed. Him through the farmer's market, where he mechanically purchased donuts and pretended not to notice the whispers as he passed. By mid-afternoon, he found himself driving past the old Harlow estate on the outskirts of town, a Victorian mansion set back from the road, once magnificent, but now showing signs of prolonged neglect. To his surprise, there was a light on in one of the downstairs windows, and a modest sedan parked in the circular drive. Without giving himself time to reconsider, Marcus pulled in and walked to the front door. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He had raised his hand to knock when the door opened suddenly, and he found himself face to face with Alexandra Harlow. She wore jeans and a faded Riverbrook high sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, a smudge of dust across her cheek. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "How did you—" "Everyone knows where the Harlow house is," he said, then winced at how that sounded. "Sorry, I wanted to make sure you were okay, after yesterday." Alexandra hesitated, then stepped back. "Would you like to come in? I can't offer much besides water or coffee. I just moved back." Marcus followed her inside, immediately struck by the contrast between the home's grand architecture and its sparse furnishings. The entryway opened to a sweeping staircase, but the adjacent sitting room contained only a simple desk, a chair, and stacks of cardboard boxes. "I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced," Marcus said, suddenly aware of how strange this must seem. "I ran into Mayor Richardson. He mentioned you've inherited some properties." Alexandra's face tightened. "I see. And he sent you to convince me. To sell to Westfield?" "What? No!" Marcus shook his head. "I'm just a bus driver. Nobody sends me anywhere." "Then why are you here?" Her directness was disarming. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I don't know. I saw you crying for 5 days straight. And then I find out you're a Harlow, and the mayor's pressuring you to sell to developers I've watched gut 3 neighboring towns. I guess I was curious." Alexandra studied him for a long moment, then gestured to the desk where her portfolio lay open among stacks of papers. "My grandfather was Edward Harlow, the one who closed the mill." "Yes." She met his gaze steadily. "My father, Robert, was Edward's youngest son. He never agreed with how the mill closure was handled, but he was outvoted by his brothers. He left Riverbrook and the family business. I grew up hearing about this town but never visiting." She walked to the desk and picked up a framed photograph, handing it to Marcus. It showed a much younger Alexandra standing between an older couple in front of the Millstone building, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. "My father died last year," she continued. "Left me his shares in the family corporation, which turns out to be quite substantial. I also inherited his guilt for what happened to Riverbrook." Alexandra took the photo back, running her thumb over the image. "He always said the Harlows owed a debt to this town. I've spent the last year piecing together what he meant by that and what I could do about it." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, trying to process this information. "So you're here to what? Save Riverbrook?" "I'm here to try," she said simply. I've developed a plan to renovate the Millstone building into a mixed-use space. Affordable housing upstairs, small business incubator, and community center below. But I'm running out of time and resources. The banks won't extend any more credit without solid community support, and Richardson's doing everything he can to block me. Why? Because Westfield's offering him something. I don't know what yet, but it's more than civic pride. She sighed. So every morning, I sit at that bus stop and stare at the building, trying to figure out what I'm missing. And crying, Marcus added softly. For the first time, her composure slipped. Yes, well, some days the debt feels too big to repay. Outside, the light was beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the room. Marcus checked his watch, realizing with a start how long he'd been there. I should go, he said, but listen, I've lived in Riverbrook my whole life. My father worked at the mill for 30 years. If anyone understands what this town needs, it's the people who've stayed through the hard times. Alexandra tilted her head. Are you offering to help? Marcus surprised himself by nodding. I know people who remember what Riverbrook used to be. Maybe between your resources and their knowledge, we could figure something out. Why would you help a Harlow? She asked, the skepticism clear in her voice. Marcus thought of the town as it had been in his childhood. The bustling main street, the sense of community, the pride. He thought of Lily, who would likely leave after high school, just like most of her predecessors, seeking opportunity elsewhere. He thought of his own life, narrowed to routine and survival after Emily's death. Because Riverbrook deserves better, he said finally, and because I'm tired of driving a bus that's going nowhere. Alexandra smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face. In that case, Mr. Reynolds, I think we have a lot to talk about. As Marcus drove home through the darkening streets of Riverbrook, past closed shops and empty lots, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a quickening in his pulse, a sense of possibility. He didn't know if Alexandra Harlow's plan could work, or if he was being naive to believe in second chances for a town that had been dying for 20 years. But for the first time since Emily's death, Marcus found himself thinking about tomorrow, with anticipation rather than resignation, and that, he decided, was worth the risk of disappointment. The morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds as Marcus prepared lunch for Lily. His conversation with Alexandra Harlow had kept him awake most of the night, her words replaying in his mind. The Harlows owed a debt to this town. What exactly did that mean? Earth to Dad. Lily waved her hand in front of his face. I asked if I could have Josh and Kayla over after school tomorrow. Sorry, kiddo. Marcus slid a sandwich into her lunchbox. Yeah, that's fine. Just make sure you guys finish your homework first. Lily studied him with that perceptive gaze she'd inherited from Emily. You're thinking about her again, aren't you? The redhead. Marcus sighed. No point denying it. Her name is Alexandra Harlow. Lily's eyes widened. Harlow, like the mansion on Miller's Hill, the one that's supposed to be haunted. It's not haunted. It's just old. Marcus zipped up the lunchbox. And yes, that Harlow. She's trying to renovate. The old mill building downtown. Is that why she was crying at the bus stop? Marcus paused. How did you... Dad, seriously. Mrs. Peterson told Mrs. Garcia, who told Kayla's mom, who told Kayla. Everybody knows. Lily rolled her eyes. Small town, remember? The Riverbrook grapevine was going to be a problem. If Alexandra was already facing opposition from Richardson, the last thing she needed was the weight of town gossip. Listen, Lily, Marcus knelt to her level. Ms. Harlow is trying to do something good for our town, but she's facing some challenges, so maybe let's not add to the gossip, okay? Lily nodded solemnly. Because the Harlows are why the town got so sad. Marcus was struck by her simple, accurate assessment. The town got sad for a lot of reasons, sweetie, but Miss Harlow wants to make it better. Do you like her? Lily asked, the question catching Marcus off guard. I barely know her. Mum would want you to like someone again, Lily said quietly. She told me that before she went to the hospital the last time. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Emily had been pragmatic until the end, making him promise not to become a hermit after she was gone. A promise he hadn't exactly kept. Let's get you to the bus stop, he said, changing the subject. I don't want you to be late. As they walked to the corner, Marcus scanned the route ahead, an old habit from his driving days. 3 blocks east, he could see the downtown bus stop, where he'd first noticed Alexandra. Empty at this hour. Dad? Lily's voice pulled him back. If Miss Harlow makes the town happy again, could we stay here forever? The question hit him with unexpected force. For years, he'd been saving what little he could, planning to eventually move somewhere with more opportunities for Lily. Somewhere she wouldn't feel trapped as he had after high school. We'll see, kiddo, he said, giving her a hug as her school bus approached. Have a good day. Lily boarded, and Marcus stood watching until the bus turned the corner. Then with sudden determination he headed downtown. The public library occupied a modest brick building off Main Street. Doris Wheeler had been the head librarian for as long as anyone could remember, her wire-rimmed glasses and perfect posture as much fixtures as the oak shelves. Marcus Reynolds, she said as he entered, twice in 1 year. To what do we owe the honor? Morning, Doris, Marcus smiled. I need to look at some old town records, specifically anything about the mill closure. Doris's eyebrows rose above. Her glasses. Interesting timing. Miss Harlow was in here yesterday asking the same thing. Of course she was. Did she find what she was looking for? Not entirely. Doris gestured for him to follow her to a back room. The newspaper archives are reasonably complete, but most of the official town records from that period are incomplete. Incomplete how? Missing, removed. Choose your euphemism. Doris unlocked a storage room filled with leather-bound volumes and acid-free boxes. Here's what we have from 1995 through 2000. The mill closed in 98, so that's your sweet spot. Marcus spent the next 2 hours poring over old issues of the Riverbrook Gazette. The headlines told a familiar story. Mill to close. 400 jobs lost. Harlow Industries cites economic necessity. Town Council emergency session. But as he dug deeper, certain details emerged that he'd been too young to understand at the time. The mill had been profitable, just not profitable enough for Harlow Industries shareholders. Edward Harlow had promised a generous severance package and retraining program that never fully materialized. And most interesting, Robert Harlow, Alexandra's father, had resigned from the board of directors a week before the closure announcement. One article caught his attention, a small piece buried on page 6 about a proposed community trust that would have transferred ownership of key downtown properties to a town-managed entity. The proposal, spearheaded by Robert Harlow, had been rejected by the board and the town council. Find anything useful? Marcus looked up to see Doris watching him. Maybe. Do you remember a community trust proposal when the mill closed? Doris removed her glasses, polishing them slowly. I remember quite a bit from that time. The trust was Robert's attempt to make things right. Edward rejected it publicly, but the real opposition came from within the town council. Richardson was just a councilman then, but already ambitious. Why would the council oppose it? Because certain members had already made private arrangements with Westfield's predecessor. Doris replaced her glasses. Nothing provable, of course, but the same council members who killed the trust proposal suddenly had new cars and vacation homes. Marcus sat back, processing this. So Richardson's been in Westfield's pocket for 20 years. I wouldn't say that on the record, Doris replied carefully. But you might want to look at property records for certain council members from 1998 to 2000. Public information, after all. As Marcus gathered his notes, Doris added, "That young Harlow woman, she reminds me of her father. Robert always saw Riverbrook as more than a balance sheet. You knew him." "Oh, yes. He used to bring Alexandra here when she was little, whenever they visited Edward. She loved the children's room, always asking for the same story about a forgotten town that came back to life." Doris smiled at the memory. "She can't have been more than 5 the last time I saw her, until yesterday." Marcus thanked Doris and headed out, his mind buzzing with new information. Robert Harlow had tried to save Riverbrook, and now his daughter was trying to finish what he started. But why the tears? What was Alexandra not telling him? He decided to make one more stop before heading home. The county records office was housed in a featureless government building on the edge of town. Marcus had been there only once before, when settling Emily's estate. The memory of that day, the antiseptic smell, the fluorescent lights, the crushing finality of death reduced to paperwork, made him hesitate at the entrance. Inside, a board. Clark directed him to a computer terminal where he could search property records. The system was outdated but functional, and within an hour, Marcus had confirmed what Doris had implied. 3 former council members had purchased expensive properties in the months following the mill closure, properties they shouldn't have been able to afford on their salaries. More importantly, he discovered something about the Millstone building. While most downtown properties had been sold to development companies, the mill itself and several surrounding parcels remained in Harlow family holdings, specifically in a trust controlled by Edward Harlow until his death in 2015, then by his eldest son Thomas, who had died last year. Now, according to the most recent filing, those properties belonged to Alexandra Harlow. But there was a complication, a lien against the properties for unpaid property taxes dating back nearly 5 years. The amount was staggering, over $800,000. Marcus stared at the screen, finally understanding why Alexandra sat crying at that bus stop every morning. She hadn't just inherited property, she'd inherited a crushing debt that would force her to sell to Westfield unless she could find another solution quickly. As he left the records office, his phone buzzed with a text from Lily, staying at Kayla's for dinner. "Her mum will drive me home. Okay?" Marcus texted back his approval, then made a decision. He drove to the Harlow estate. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the property as Marcus pulled into the circular drive. Alexandra's car was there, and light glowed from more windows than before. He knocked, hearing movement inside. When Alexandra opened the door, she looked different, more animated, despite signs of fatigue around her eyes. She wore a paint-splattered Harvard sweatshirt, her hair tied back. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, surprised. "I wasn't expecting you." "Marcus," he corrected. "And I know about the tax lien." Her expression shifted, wariness replacing surprise. "You've been investigating me." "Not you. This situation." Marcus gestured around them. "I grew up here. My dad lost everything when the mill closed. I want to understand what really happened." Alexandra considered him for a moment, then stepped back. "You'd better come in." Inside, the house had undergone a transformation since yesterday. Furniture had been uncovered, boxes unpacked. In the sitting room, architectural drawings were spread across a table, showing detailed renovation plans for the Millstone building. "You've been busy," Marcus observed. "I work better when I have a deadline." Alexandra crossed to a sideboard where a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses sat. "Drink? I think we both could use one." Marcus hadn't had a proper drink in years, but he nodded. Alexandra poured 2 fingers for each of them and handed him a glass. "To lost causes," she said, raising her glass. "Is that what this is?" Marcus asked. Alexandra took a sip, then set her glass down and moved to the table of drawings. The tax bill comes due in 30 days. I've appealed, but Richardson controls the tax board. They've denied every request. How did it get so high? My Uncle Thomas stopped paying taxes on these properties 5 years ago. He was not well, mentally. By the time he died and I inherited, the amount had ballooned with penalties and interest. She tapped the plans. I could pay it if I had time to renovate and lease the millstone. The income would cover the debt within 2 years. But you need to pay it now to avoid foreclosure. Exactly. Alexandra's shoulders sagged slightly. I've tried everything. Loans, investors, even approaching other family members. No one wants to touch Riverbrook. It's seen as a lost cause. Marcus studied the plans. They were impressive. A thoughtful redesign that preserved the building's historic character while creating modern, functional spaces. These are good. Really good. Thank you. I worked in urban renewal in Boston before this. She picked up her glass again. This was supposed to be my legacy project, fixing what my grandfather broke. And sitting at the bus stop? Alexandra smiled faintly. The first time was accidental. I'd missed the Portland bus and was waiting for the next one. But something about that view of the millstone. I could see what it could be, not just what it was. So I kept coming back. It became a ritual, probably a bit melodramatic. And the crying. Her smile faded. Some days the weight of it all catches up to me. My father spent his life regretting what happened here. On his deathbed, he made me promise to make it right. She took another sip. I'm not sure I can keep that promise now. Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown gardens that had once been the pride of Riverbrook. What if there was another way to get the money? I've explored every option, Alexandra said. Unless you know someone with a spare $1 million who believes in second chances for dying mill towns. Not $1 million, but I might know a way to buy you some time. Marcus turned back to her. You said your father proposed a community trust? Before the mill closed? Alexandra nodded, surprise evident on her face. You found that in your research? Yes, his idea was to transfer the commercial properties to a community-managed trust. The town would gradually buy the shares from Harlow Industries, creating a sustainable ownership model. What if we revived that idea, created a trust now, got the community involved? Marcus felt energy building as he spoke. The people here have more resources than you might think, not individually, but together. A community investment fund. Alexandra looked skeptical. In 30 days. Richardson and his cronies don't represent the real Riverbrook, Marcus insisted. There are families who've been here for generations, who remember what this town could be. If they understood what you're trying to do, they'd still see me. And Harlow, Alexandra interrupted, the family that destroyed their livelihoods. Then we need to change that perception. Marcus set his glass down, mind racing. My neighbor Roy Callahan runs the local radio station. Linda Martinez prints the Gazette now. My friend Chris owns the Riverside Diner where everyone gets breakfast. We start there, get the word out. Alexandra studied him, her skepticism giving way to cautious interest. Why are you doing this? Why help me? It was the same question she'd asked yesterday, but now Marcus had a better answer. He thought of Lily, asking if they could stay in Riverbrook forever, of Emily, who'd loved this town even as it crumbled around them, of his own life, reduced to predictable routes and careful avoidance of anything that might hurt again. Because I've been driving in circles for 5 years, he said finally. Because my daughter deserves to grow up in a town with a future. And because you were right at that bus stop, I've been watching you. Not just this week, but from the first day. Something about you. He trailed off, feeling exposed. Alexandra held his gaze, something shifting in her expression. I noticed you too, she admitted quietly. You have kind eyes, even before you helped me with the paper. The confession hung between them, unexpected and fragile. Marcus felt a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the bourbon. "So," Alexandra said after a moment, straightening her shoulders, "this community trust, how do we start?" Marcus smiled, feeling more purposeful than he had in years. "We start with your story. The real story, not the Harlow reputation. If people understand what you're trying to do and why, some will step up, and if they don't, then at least we tried." Marcus looked at the architectural plans again. "But I'm betting on Riverbrook. There's still heart in this town." Alexandra walked to a desk in the corner and returned with a small leather book. "My father's journal," she explained, opening it to a marked page. "He wrote this the day after the mill closure was announced." She read aloud, "Edward believes you can measure a town's value by its tax base and growth potential. But Riverbrook's worth lies in its people, in Roy Callahan, who drives the snowplow all night during blizzards, in Doris Wheeler, who makes sure every child has books, in the Reynolds family who've worked the mill for 3 generations. If they understood what we've done to them, they'd never forgive us, but if they understood what they could do for themselves, they might just save this town despite us." Marcus felt a prickle along his spine at the mention of his family. "Your father knew mine?" "Apparently." Alexandra closed the journal. There are other entries where he mentions a Frank Reynolds, a foreman who confronted Edward directly about the closure. "That was my dad," Marcus said softly. "He never talked about it." Alexandra set the journal down and turned to face him fully. "So, a bus driver and a Harlow, trying to save a town that has every reason to distrust us both. Quite the long shot." "The best kind," Marcus replied, surprising himself with his confidence. "We start tomorrow. I'm off duty, and I know exactly who we need to talk to first." As the evening shadows lengthened across the room, they began to sketch out a plan. 2 strangers, connected by old family wounds and new possibilities, finding common purpose in a town both had reason to give up on. From opposite sides of Riverbrook's tragedy, they discovered a shared vision of its potential redemption, and somewhere beneath the practical discussion of community meetings and legal structures, something else was taking root. A connection neither had expected to find at this point in their lives. Something as fragile and promising as the plans spread before them. When Marcus finally left the Harlow estate that evening, the weight of the day's discoveries should have been exhausting. Instead, he felt strangely energized, his mind racing with possibilities as he drove through the darkening streets of Riverbrook. For the first time in years, tomorrow seemed like more than just another day to get through. It felt like the beginning of something that mattered. The Riverside Diner hummed with morning activity as Marcus pushed open the door, the bell jingling above his head. Sunday breakfast rush was in full swing. The clatter of plates, the sizzle of bacon, the steady murmur of conversation. This was Riverbrook's unofficial town hall, where news traveled faster than the coffee refills. Alexandra hesitated in the doorway behind him, and Marcus understood why. Conversations noticeably dimmed as patrons recognized the Harlow air. Decades of resentment hung in the air like the steam from the grill. "You sure about this?" she whispered. "Trust me," Marcus replied, though his confidence wavered. He spotted Chris Martinez behind the counter, a dish towel slung over his shoulder, his expression unreadable as he watched them approach. "Morning, Chris." Marcus nodded, keeping his tone casual as he took a seat at the counter. Alexandra settled beside him, her posture straight but her fingers fidgeting with a napkin. "Marcus." Chris acknowledged him with a nod, then turned deliberately to Alexandra. "Miss Harlow heard you were back in town." "Mr. Martinez," she replied, meeting his gaze. "Thank you for allowing me in your establishment." Chris raised an eyebrow. "It's a public diner. We don't turn away paying customers." The implicit message was clear she was being tolerated, not welcomed. Marcus felt a flash of protectiveness, but pushed it aside. This was Alexandra's battle to fight. "My father spoke highly of your father," Alexandra said, surprising both men. "Said Miguel Martinez made the best apple pie in 3 counties and never turned away a hungry family during the strike of '89, even when they couldn't pay." Chris's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Dad believed in community first, profit second. Learned that lesson from him. "Sounds like a wise man," Alexandra replied. "I'd like to learn more if you'd be willing to share sometime." Before Chris could respond, the bell above the door jingled again. Mayor Richardson strode in, his campaign smile already fixed in place as he greeted patrons. His stride faltered momentarily when he spotted Marcus and Alexandra at the counter. "Well, well," Richardson recovered smoothly, approaching them. "Ms. Harlow and Mr. Reynolds, quite the unexpected partnership." "Mayor," Marcus nodded curtly. "Just grabbing breakfast," Alexandra added, her tone neutral. "The Riverside comes highly. Recommended." Richardson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Best in town. Though I'm surprised to see you patronizing local businesses when you're so eager to sell off your holdings to outside developers." The nearby conversations quieted as heads turned toward them. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but Alexandra spoke. Before he could, "I think you may have misunderstood my intentions, Mayor," she said, her voice clear enough to carry to the curious diners. "I have no plans to sell to Westfield or any outside developer. In fact, I'm exploring options to create a community ownership model for the downtown properties, starting with renovating the Millstone." Richardson's smile froze. "Community ownership? Surely you're not reviving Robert's old fantasy? That ship sailed 20 years ago." "Ships can return to port," Alexandra replied evenly, "especially when they were diverted by interference in the first place." A heavy silence fell over the diner. Chris had stopped wiping the counter, his attention fixed on their exchange. Richardson leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Be careful making accusations about the past, Ms. Harlow. This town has a long memory for the damage your family caused, and for promises that were never kept," Marcus added pointedly. Richardson straightened, eyeing Marcus with a new calculation. "Interesting companion you've chosen, Ms. Harlow. A bus driver with no background in development or finance. I'm sure he'll be tremendously helpful with your community model." With that, he turned and headed to his usual booth in the corner, where 2 men in business suits waited. "Westfield representatives," Chris said quietly, nodding toward the suits. "Been meeting them here every Sunday for a month. Not my business what they discuss, but it happens in your diner, so you overhear things," Marcus finished. Chris shrugged. "Order up before I lose my best customers." He slid 2 menus across the counter. "Coffee's on the house today." As Chris moved away to greet other patrons, Alexandra exhaled. "That went better than expected." "Did it?" Marcus glanced toward Richardson's booth. "He didn't seem thrilled with your announcement." "No, but everyone else heard it." Alexandra nodded subtly toward the rest of the diner, where patrons were now engaged in animated conversations, glancing their way. "The news will be all over town by noon." Marcus smiled, impressed by her strategy. "You planned that." "Calculated risk," she acknowledged. "What better place to start changing the narrative than the town hub? Though I didn't expect Richardson to make it so easy." After they ordered, Marcus noticed Roy Callahan enter the diner, a bear of a man with a silver beard and the booming voice that had narrated Riverbrook's morning commute on local radio for 20 years. "Roy!" Marcus waved him over. "Got a minute?" Roy approached, his gaze curious as it moved between Marcus and Alexandra. "Morning, Marcus. Ms. Harlow?" His tone was respectful but reserved. "Please, call me Alexandra." "Roy hosts the morning show on WRIV," Marcus explained. "If anyone can help get the word out about your plans, it's him." Roy rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Been hearing things. Richardson's been hinting that Millstone finally getting demolished. Says it's a done deal. It's not, Alexandra stated, firmly. Not if this town doesn't want it to be. Roy studied her for a long moment. My station's small, but our reach is decent. You'd be welcome to come on, explain your side. Really? Alexandra's surprise was evident. Just like that? I knew your father, Roy said simply. He was the only Harlow who came to the union meetings after the announcement, listened more than he talked, never made excuses. He glanced toward Richardson's booth. And I've never trusted a word that man says. Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. We'll go live. As Roy departed with his to-go order, Chris returned with their food. Saw you talking to Roy, he remarked. Good man, lost his pension when the mill closed. Never bitter, though. Unlike some of us, came a voice from down the counter. Marcus turned to see Frank Wilson, who'd worked alongside his father at the mill. Now in his 70s, Frank's face was a map of hard years and harder feelings. The Harlows gutted this town, Frank continued, staring directly at Alexandra. Now, one of them shows up with fancy plans and we're supposed to forget? Alexandra met his gaze steadily. No, Mr. Wilson, you shouldn't forget. What happened was wrong. I can't undo it, but I can try to build something better. Why should we believe? You? Frank demanded. Because I have nothing to gain by lying, Alexandra replied. I could sell to Westfield tomorrow and walk away with millions. Instead, I'm risking everything I have. And why's that? Frank pressed. Alexandra hesitated, then pulled a worn photograph from her jacket pocket, the same one she'd shown Marcus of her with her parents in front of the Millstone building. Because my father taught me that wealth without purpose is poverty of the soul, and because Riverbrook deserves better than what my family left it with. Frank studied the photo, something shifting in his weathered face. Robert, he said finally, always different from the rest of them. He handed the photo back. I'll listen to what you have to say on Roy's show, not promising more than that. As Frank returned to his breakfast, Chris leaned over the counter. You just won the first round, he said quietly. Frank's opinion carries weight with the old mill crowd. They finished their meal in contemplative silence. As they paid their bill, Chris slid a business card across the counter. My sister Linda runs the Gazette now. Call her. If you're really planning community ownership, she'll want to cover it. Outside, the morning sun had warmed the autumn air. Alexandra took a deep breath as they walked toward Marcus's truck. That was intense. Small towns, Marcus shrugged. Everyone's connected. Every story matters. I hadn't expected so much openness to the idea, she admitted. Richardson made it sound like the entire town was united against me. Richardson only cares about Richardson, Marcus replied. Most folks here just want Riverbrook to thrive again. They climbed into his truck, and Marcus noticed Alexandra looking back at the diner with a pensive expression. What is it? When my father brought me here as a child, she said softly. This town felt magical to me. The mill was still running then. The storefronts were full. People smiled at us. She turned to him. I want to see that again. Me too, Marcus said, startled by the longing in her voice. It mirrored something in him he'd nearly forgotten as they drove through town toward the Millstone building. Alexandra pointed out details in the architecture he'd stopped noticing years ago. The ornate cornices, the hand-carved woodwork, the craftsmanship from an era when buildings were meant to last generations. The original Millstone was designed as more than a factory, she explained, excitement building in her voice. It was a community hub. The ground floor had public spaces, a library, meeting rooms, even a small theater. I never knew that, Marcus admitted. Few people do. When my grandfather expanded operations in the 1970s, those spaces were converted to offices. But the bones are still there. She pointed to the boarded windows. Behind those boards are 15-foot ceilings with original crown molding. Hardwood floors under the industrial carpet. History is worth preserving. They parked across from the building, and Alexandra pulled out a set of keys. Want to see inside? Marcus hesitated. Is it safe? Safe enough. I had structural engineers. Through last month. She grinned. Come on, bus driver. Don't you want to see what you're fighting for? Her enthusiasm was infectious. They crossed the street and approached the chain-link fence surrounding the property. Alexandra unlocked a padlocked gate, and they slipped through. The massive oak doors of the main entrance were secured with heavy chains, but Alexandra led him around to a side entrance. A modern lockbox was mounted beside the door. She punched in a code, retrieved a key, and unlocked it. After you, she gestured. Marcus stepped into dimness. As his eyes adjusted, he found himself in what must have been a receiving area. Dust motes danced in shafts of light streaming through cracks in the boarded windows. The air smelled of old wood and neglect, but not decay. This way, Alexandra guided him through a corridor into what opened into a vast space. This was the main factory floor. Marcus gazed up at the soaring ceiling, supported by massive timber beams. Remnants of machinery stood like industrial sculptures throughout the space. But what caught his attention were the windows, massive arched affairs that stretched nearly from floor to ceiling, though currently boarded over. Imagine this with the boards gone, Alexandra said, her voice echoing slightly. Natural light flooding in. We divide it thoughtfully. Retail spaces along the perimeter, an open market in the center, maybe a food hall showcasing local vendors. She moved through the space with the confidence of someone who'd walked it many times, pointing out where stairs would be restored, where walls would come down, where history would be preserved while creating something new. The upper 2 floors would be residential, she continued. Affordable apartments, some designated for seniors, others for young families. People who work downtown could live downtown. Marcus followed, trying to picture it. How many jobs would this create during renovation? At least 50 construction positions after completion, she considered. The businesses that would operate here could employ another 100, depending on what establishes itself, plus property management, security, maintenance. And the cost? He asked, the practical question tempering his growing excitement. Alexandra's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Full renovation would be around $3 million, but we could phase it, focus on the ground floor commercial space first, use that income to fund the residential conversion later. And the tax bill? She sighed. Still due in 28 days. That hasn't changed. They climbed a staircase to the 2nd floor, where the space opened into what had once been administrative offices. A large corner room with windows on 2 sides had been partially cleared of debris, a folding table set up with blueprints and documents. My field office, Alexandra explained. I've been working here most afternoons. Marcus approached the table where architectural drawings showed. The building transformed. Beside them lay financial projections, construction timelines, and something that caught his eye. A list of potential community investors with amounts penciled beside names. You've already approached people? He asked, surprised. No, that's just research. People who might have means and motivation to participate in a trust. She looked embarrassed. I've been thorough in my homework. Marcus scanned the list. Many names he recognized, some surprising him with the amounts. His own name was there, with a modest figure beside it. You included me, he noted. Hope, not expectation, she replied quickly. I researched everyone with historical ties to the mill or downtown. Something about seeing his name on her list moved him. She'd considered him a potential ally even before they'd met. He turned back to the windows, where one board had been removed to provide a view of Main Street. From this vantage point, he could see the empty storefronts, the faded awnings, the absence of pedestrians on a Sunday morning. "You really think this could work?" he asked, the enormity of the challenge settling over him. One building changing everything? Alexandra joined him at the window. Not just the building, the idea behind it. Community ownership creates investment beyond money. People protect what belongs to them. As they stood there, Marcus noticed an envelope on the windowsill, addressed to Alexandra in elegant handwriting. She followed his gaze and picked it up. "Another one," she murmured, opening it. A single sheet of paper emerged, which she read quickly, her expression darkening. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "A warning. I've been getting them since I started spending time here." She handed him the note. "The millstone has claimed enough lives. Leave it in the past where it belongs. Riverbrook is dying. Let it go in peace." "Lives?" Marcus looked up, confused. "There was never a fatal accident at the mill, as far as I know." Alexandra hesitated, then walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. She extracted a thick folder and returned to the table, spreading out newspaper clippings and photocopied reports. "In the 3 years after the mill closed, Riverbrook's suicide rate tripled," she said quietly. 7 former employees took their own lives. 5 of them did it here, in this building, after it was abandoned. Marcus felt his breath catch. "I knew about Cooper Jenkins and Bill Mercer, but 5? Alexandra nodded grimly. "The Gazette stopped reporting the details after the 3rd one, apparently at Richardson's request. Bad for town morale." Her finger traced a line in one report. "My father kept track. He felt responsible." "Did my father know?" Marcus asked, thinking of Frank Reynolds' stoic silence in the years after the mill closed. "I believe he did," Alexandra replied softly. "According to my father's journals, Frank Reynolds was the one who found Bill Mercer." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His father had never mentioned it, but so much made sense now. The nightmares, the drinking, the periods of deep depression that had marked his childhood. "This is what the notes are warning about," Alexandra continued. "Some people believe the building is cursed by those deaths, that restoring it would be disrespectful." Marcus looked around the space with new awareness. "Or maybe transforming. It is exactly what's needed. To honor what was lost by creating something new." Alexandra smiled faintly. "That's what I think too." As they continued exploring the massive building, Marcus began to see it through dual lenses, what it had been, what it could become, and the painful history bridging those realities. This wasn't just about economic revitalization or preserving architecture. It was about healing old wounds that ran deeper than he'd understood. In a small room on the 3rd floor, they discovered an unexpected treasure. A wall where workers had signed their names over decades. Hundreds of signatures. Dates ranging from 1920 to 1998, with small notes beside many. Martin Jones, 43 years of honest work. Sally Winters, first female foreman, 1986. And there, near the bottom, Frank Reynolds, 1966-1998, proudly following my father and grandfather. Marcus traced the faded signature with his finger, a lump forming in his throat. "I never knew this was here." "It's a testament," Alexandra said quietly, "to lives built around this place." She placed her hand beside his on the wall. "This is why I cry at the bus stop, because I understand what was lost, and how much it matters to make it right." In that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of Riverbrooks, past and the promise of its potential future, something shifted between them. No longer just allies in a community project, but partners in something more profound, a shared vision born from different sides of the same tragedy. As the afternoon light began to fade, they made their way back to the main floor. Alexandra stopped at the massive front doors, producing another key. "There's one more thing I want to show you," she said, unlocking the chains. The doors groaned as they opened, revealing the grand entrance that had once welcomed hundreds of workers daily. Above the doorway, preserved under decades of neglect, was a stained glass transom depicting the original watermill that had given Riverbrook its name. Sunlight streamed through the colored glass, casting jewel-toned patterns across the dusty floor. The effect was unexpectedly beautiful, a moment of grace in the abandoned building. "The Heritage Commission doesn't even know this survived," Alexandra said, her voice hushed with reverence. "My grandfather commissioned it in 1945 to commemorate the mill's workers who served in World War II. Their names are etched in the border." Marcus looked up, awestruck by the craftsmanship and meaning embedded in the glass. This was Riverbrook's story, not just the pain of its decline, but the pride and purpose of its prime. And for the first time, he fully understood what Alexandra was fighting for. "I'm in," he said simply. "Whatever it takes to save this place, I'm with you." Alexandra turned to him, surprise and hope mingling in her expression. "Even knowing the odds?" "Especially knowing the odds," he replied. "Some things are worth the risk." As they stood in the colored light of Riverbrook's forgotten history, the path forward became clear. This wasn't just about a building or a tax, bill, or even a community trust. It was about reclaiming a future from the grip of the past, for the town, for its people, and perhaps for themselves as well. They secured the building and walked back to Marcus's truck in companionable silence, both processing the day's discoveries. What had begun as a fact-finding mission had transformed into something deeper, a commitment to a cause neither had expected to find. And for Marcus, something else had changed too. The woman who had been crying at his bus stop was no longer a mystery or a Harlow or even just an ally. She was Alexandra, complex, determined, and awakening parts of himself he'd thought were gone forever. Tomorrow, they would begin the real work of saving the millstone. Today, they had rediscovered its soul. "Daddy, you're humming," Lily observed, her eyes narrowing with suspicion over her cereal bowl. "You never hum." Marcus paused, spatula midway through flipping pancakes. He hadn't even realized he was doing. "It's some old Journey song that had been playing at the Riverside Diner yesterday." "Just in a good mood," he replied, sliding a pancake onto her plate. "Because of Ms. Harlow?" Lily asked with the blunt precision only a 12-year-old could manage. Marcus nearly dropped the spatula. "What makes you say that?" Lily rolled her eyes. "Mrs. Garcia told me she saw you two at the diner yesterday, and Kayla's dad says you were sneaking around the old mill building together." "We weren't sneaking," Marcus corrected, feeling his neck warm. "Ms. Harlow was showing me her renovation plans." "Uh-huh." Lily took a deliberate bite of pancake. "So when do I get to meet her?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know." Dad," Lily interrupted, "if you're going to start dating again, I should probably meet her, right?" "Whoa." Marcus held up his hands. "Nobody said anything about dating. We're working on a community project together, that's all." Lily's expression made it clear she wasn't convinced. "Mum said I'd know when you were ready to move on, because you'd start humming again." The simple observation hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Emily had always teased him about his unconscious humming when he was happy, a habit he couldn't remember. Engaging in since her death, his phone buzzed with a text, offering a welcome distraction. It was from Alexandra. "Meeting with Linda Martinez at Gazette office at 10. Then radio interview prep at noon." "Can you make either?" Marcus texted back quickly. "Both. We'll pick you up at 9:30. "Is that her?" Lily asked, peering across the table. "Yes. And it's about work," Marcus replied, tucking his phone away. "Now finish your breakfast or you'll miss the bus." "You could drive me," Lily suggested innocently, "since you're off duty today." "Nice try, but I have appointments." Marcus tapped her plate. "Eat up." After dropping Lily at the bus stop, Marcus drove to the Harlow estate with an unexpected flutter of anticipation in his stomach. 24 hours ago, he'd been just a bus driver with a routine life. Now he was, what exactly? Partner in an ambitious town revitalization project? Defender of Riverbrook's forgotten history? Friend to a woman who cried at bus stops? Alexandra was waiting on the porch steps, a leather messenger bag at her feet. She wore jeans and a navy blazer over a simple white shirt. Professional but approachable. Her hair was pulled back, revealing delicate silver earrings shaped like maple leaves. "Morning," she greeted him, picking up her bag. "Ready to face the press?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, opening the passenger door for her. "Though Linda Martinez has known me since kindergarten, so I doubt she'll grill me too hard." "It's not Linda I'm worried about," Alexandra said, as they pulled away from the estate. "It's what Richardson will do once our plans go public. You think he'll fight back? I know he will." Alexandra's expression was grim. "This morning I received an email from the tax assessor's office. They've rejected my final appeal on the back taxes. Payment is due in full in 27 days, or the properties go to public auction." Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Can they do that? Move up the timeline? They claim it's just a clarification of the original notice." Alexandra's voice was calm, but Marcus could hear the tension underneath. "Richardson's scared, which means we're on the right track." The Riverbrook Gazette occupied a narrow storefront on Main Street, its large front windows plastered with the week's headlines and community announcements. Inside, the smell of printer ink and coffee mingled in the air. Linda Martinez looked up from her desk as they entered, her sharp eyes taking in the unlikely pair. "Well, well," she said, rising to greet them. "Marcus Reynolds and Alexandra Harlow. Chris said you two were cooking up something interesting." After introductions and coffee, they settled in Linda's cluttered office. Alexandra laid out her vision for the Millstone building and the community trust model, while Marcus explained how local investment could create sustainable ownership. Linda took rapid notes, interjecting occasionally with pointed questions about financing, timeline, and community benefits. When Alexandra revealed the accelerated tax deadline, Linda's eyebrows shot up. "Richardson's playing hardball," she remarked. "Not surprising. Westfield's been advertising in the Gazette for months. Premium rates, prepaid for the year. He probably promised them a smooth acquisition." "So you understand what we're up against," Alexandra said. Linda set down her pen. "My father lost his job at the mill just like everyone else, but he also lost the contract to print the company newsletters when Harlow Industries moved their business to Portland." She leaned forward. "The mill closure didn't just hurt the workers. It gutted the entire town ecosystem." "I know," Alexandra acknowledged quietly. "That's why this project matters. It's not just about one building. It's about restoring Riverbrook's economic heart." Linda studied her for a long moment, then turned. "DeMarcus, and you believe in this enough to stake your reputation on it?" "I do," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I've seen the plans. I walked through the building. This could be the catalyst Riverbrook needs." Linda nodded slowly. "I'll run the story tomorrow. Front page. But I need something visual. Photos inside. The millstone. Architectural renderings. Something to help people see what you're describing." "I can provide all of that," Alexandra assured her, "and access to the building if you want to take your own photos." "One more thing," Linda added, her expression serious. "The town will want to know why. Why now? Why this building? Why should they trust a Harlow?" Alexandra exchanged a glance with Marcus before responding. "Because my father's greatest regret was not fighting harder for Riverbrook. I inherited that regret along with his shares in the family business. This is my chance to make it right. Not to erase the past, but to build a better future from it." Linda's pen scratched across her notepad. "That's your headline right there," she said with a hint of approval. "Now let's talk about this community trust model in detail." They spent the next hour outlining how local investors could purchase shares in the revitalized millstone, with profit sharing tied to community impact metrics. By the time they left, Linda had committed not only to the front page story but to hosting a community forum at the Gazette office later that week. That went well, Marcus observed as they headed toward the WRIV radio station for their next meeting. Better than I expected, Alexandra agreed. I thought we'd face more skepticism. People are ready for hope, Marcus replied simply. They've been waiting 20 years for someone to care about Riverbrook's future. At the radio station, Roy Callahan greeted them warmly, ushering them into the small broadcast booth. Tomorrow's interview will be live, he explained, but I thought we'd do a practice run today, get you comfortable with the format. As they settled in with headphones, Roy outlined his plan. I'll introduce the project, then open with softball questions about your vision. But, he added with a meaningful look, I'll also ask the hard questions, the ones listeners will want answers to. About the Harlow family, about the tax situation, about why a bus driver and a Boston developer think they can save a town that's been declining for 2 decades. Alexandra nodded. I appreciate your directness. We need to address the skepticism head on. Roy had them sit at the microphones while he ran through a mock interview. Alexandra handled the technical questions with ease, explaining the phased renovation approach and the economic projections. Marcus spoke about the community. Impact, jobs created, local businesses supported, housing made available. When Roy asked about the Harlow legacy, Alexandra's response was candid. My grandfather made a business decision that devastated hundreds of families. I can't undo that damage, but I can honor the community's resilience by investing in its future. And why should people believe you'll stay and see this through? Roy pressed. What happens when the going gets tough? Alexandra hesitated, and Marcus found himself leaning forward. Because she's already stayed when it would have been easier to walk away, he said into his microphone. She could have sold these properties months ago and disappeared. Instead, she's fighting for them and for Riverbrook against substantial odds. Roy nodded approvingly. That's good. Personal testimony carries weight. Now, what about the timeline? Richardson's been telling people a tax sale is inevitable. We have 27 days to raise enough capital to cover the tax bill, Alexandra acknowledged. It's an aggressive timeline, but not impossible with community support. And if you fail, Roy asked bluntly. Alexandra met his gaze. Then at least Riverbrook will have seen what's possible. Ideas don't die with deadlines. Someone else might pick up where we left off. After the practice session, Roy walked them out. You two have chemistry, he observed. Comes across on air. Use that tomorrow. As they headed back to Marcus's truck, Alexandra's phone rang. Her expression darkened as she checked the screen. It's the bank, she said, answering. Marcus watched, her face as she listened, her posture gradually stiffening. I understand, she said finally. Thank you for letting me know. She ended the call and stood motionless on the sidewalk. What happened? Marcus asked. The construction loan I'd been negotiating, Alexandra said, her voice carefully controlled. They've declined the application, cited unfavorable local economic indicators and uncertain ownership status as reasons. Richardson, Marcus growled. He got to them. Likely, she agreed. Which means he's also probably going after potential investors. They walked in silence for a few moments, Marcus's mind racing. We need to accelerate the community forum, he said finally. Get ahead of whatever narrative Richardson is spinning. The paper doesn't come out until tomorrow, Alexandra reminded him. Not the paper. Marcus stopped walking, an idea forming. The school. My daughter Lily's class is doing community projects this month. What if we presented to them? Get the kids excited. They tell their parents. A smile slowly spread across Alexandra's face. Grassroots mobilization through the PTA circuit. That's actually brilliant. Ms. Collins, Lily's teacher, is always looking for real-world learning opportunities, Marcus continued, warming to the idea. And the school auditorium could host a larger community meeting once word spreads. Do you think she'd agree on such short notice? Marcus was already pulling out his phone. Only one way to find out. To his relief, Sarah Collins was enthusiastic about the proposal. A real-life community development project? With architectural plans and everything. The kids will love it, she assured him. How about tomorrow afternoon? We can combine my class with Mr. Perez's economics students. After confirming the details, Marcus turned to Alexandra with a victorious grin. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., we've got 50 middle and high school students as our first audience. Terrifying, Alexandra laughed, but inspired, making the next generation. Stakeholders in the project, and I should have thought of that. That's why you need a local on your team, Marcus replied. I may not know finance, but I know how Riverbrook works. As they drove back toward the Harlow estate, a comfortable silence settled between them. The day had been productive despite the bank's rejection, and for the first time, their abstract plans were taking concrete shape. Would you like to come in for dinner? Alexandra asked as they pulled into the circular drive. It's nothing fancy, but I make a decent pasta. Marcus hesitated, thinking of Lily waiting at home. I should check on my daughter, but maybe we could both come over. You said to yourself she should meet you if we're going to be working together. Alexandra looked, surprised then pleased. I'd like that. Are you sure she wouldn't mind? Actually, she specifically asked to meet you this morning, Marcus admitted. News travels fast in small towns. What did you tell her about me? Alexandra asked, suddenly looking nervous. That we're working on a project together, he replied. Though she has some alternative theories. Alexandra raised an eyebrow. Oh, she thinks we might be dating, Marcus said, the words coming out in a rush. Kids and their imaginations, right? A faint blush colored Alexandra's cheeks. Right. Well, I'd be happy to meet her regardless. She checked her watch. Dinner in an hour? That should give me time to dust off my grandmother's lasagna recipe. We'll be here, Marcus promised. When he picked up Lily from her after-school program, her face lit up at the dinner invitation. Finally, she exclaimed. I was starting to think you were keeping her a secret. It's not like that, Marcus protested weakly. We're professional collaborators. Sure, Dad, Lily smirked. That's why you're changing your shirt for the third. On time. Marcus abandoned his wardrobe deliberations, was a button-down too formal, a t-shirt too casual, and settled on a clean flannel shirt, practical yet slightly nicer than his everyday wear. Lily, meanwhile, had changed into her favorite dress and was brushing her hair with unusual dedication. Do you think she likes kids? She asked, studying her reflection critically. I'm sure she does, Marcus replied, touched by her effort. But remember, this is just dinner with my project partner. Don't get any big ideas. Lily's knowing smile suggested she already had plenty. The Harlow estate looked different in the early evening light, less imposing, more inviting. Warm light spilled from the windows, and when Alexandra opened the door, the aroma of garlic and herbs wafted out. Welcome, she greeted them, her eyes moving to Lily with a genuine smile. You must be Lily. I've heard wonderful things about you. Hi, Ms. Harlow, Lily replied, suddenly shy. Thank you for inviting us. Please, call me Alex, she insisted, ushering them inside. Only my grandfather's lawyers call me Ms. Harlow. The house's interior had undergone another transformation since Marcus's last visit. The sitting room furniture had been uncovered and arranged around a large coffee table where architectural drawings were displayed. The dining room, visible through an archway, was set with what appeared to be heirloom china and crystal glasses. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, Marcus said, feeling slightly overwhelmed. It's no trouble, Alexandra assured him. Besides, this house has hosted too few guests over the years. It deserves some life. During dinner, Lily gradually overcome her shyness, asking Alexandra about Boston, her work as an urban planner, and eventually the Millstone project. "So you're going to make the old building into apartments and shops?" Lily asked, helping herself to seconds of lasagna. "That sounds awesome. Downtown is so boring now." "That's the plan," Alexandra confirmed, "though we need to convince a lot of people to help us first. Like a team project," Lily nodded sagely. "Those are the worst, unless you have the right teammates," Alexandra replied, her eyes meeting Marcus's briefly. As the meal progressed, Marcus noticed how naturally Alexandra engaged with Lily, drawing her out with questions about school and friends, listening attentively to her answers. There was no condescension in her manner, just genuine interest. After dinner, Alexandra brought out a folder. "I have something to show you both," she said, spreading out a series of sketches. "These are preliminary ideas for the community spaces. In Millstone, I'd love your input." The drawings showed a transformed building with a central atrium, small retail spaces, and a large community area. "This could be flexible," Alexandra explained, pointing to the community space. "Events, classes, meetings. What about a teen center?" Lily suggested. "There's nowhere for kids to go after school except the library, and Mrs. Wheeler shushes us if we laugh too loud." "That's an excellent idea," Alexandra said, making a note on the margin. "What would you want in a teen center?" As Lily enthusiastically described her vision, comfortable seating, art supplies, a small performance space for music, Marcus watched the interaction with a warmth spreading through his chest. In just one evening, Alexandra had accomplished something remarkable. She'd made the project real for Lily, giving her a stake in its success. Later, after Lily had explored the mansion's grand staircase and Alexandra had shown her the collection of vintage clothing in an upstairs closet, they prepared to leave. Lily hugged Alexandra impulsively. "Thanks for the best dinner ever. Your house is amazing and your project is really cool." "Thank you for your ideas," Alexandra replied, returning the hug. "They're going to make the project better." As Lily skipped down to the truck, Alexandra turned to Marcus. "She's wonderful," she said softly. "You've done an amazing job with her." And can't take much credit," Marcus admitted. "She's Emily through and through, the curiosity, the kindness, all her." "I doubt that," Alexandra replied. "I see plenty of you in her, too, the way she listens before speaking, the thoughtful questions." They stood in the doorway, conscious of Lily waiting in the truck, but reluctant to end the evening. "Thank you for tonight," Marcus said finally. "It meant a lot to her, to both of us." "It meant a lot to me, too," Alexandra confessed. "This house has been lonely. Your daughter brought it to life." On impulse, Marcus reached for her hand, squeezing it briefly. "Tomorrow's a big day. Radio interview, school presentation. You ready?" Alexandra's fingers tightened around his. "With you there, absolutely." The moment lingered, charged with unspoken possibility, until Lily honked the truck horn playfully. They broke apart with startled laughs. "Good night, Marcus," Alexandra said, color rising in her cheeks. "Good night, Alex," he replied, using her preferred name for the first time. As they drove home, Lily was uncharacteristically quiet, watching the darkened landscape pass by. Finally she spoke. "Dad, I like her. A lot." "Me too, kiddo," Marcus admitted. "Not just as your work friend," Lily clarified. "As a person who makes you smile again?" Marcus glanced at his perceptive daughter, knowing denial would be futile. "It's complicated, Lil. We've only known each other for a few days." "Mom always said time doesn't matter as much as connection," Lily replied with the serene confidence of someone repeating a universal truth. "And you guys definitely have that." Marcus couldn't argue. Something had formed between him and Alexandra, a connection born from shared purpose, but evolving into something deeper. Against all odds and history, they had found common ground in their hopes for Riverbrook, and perhaps for themselves. As they turned onto their street, Lily yawned widely. "Know what I think?" she asked sleepily. "What's that?" "I think Mom would really like her." The simple statement hung in the darkness, not a weight but a blessing. Marcus reached over and squeezed his daughter's hand, grateful beyond words for her wisdom and permission. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Richardson's opposition, public scrutiny, the ticking clock of the tax deadline. But tonight, for the first time in years, Marcus felt something he'd nearly forgotten, the quiet excitement of new possibilities and the courage to pursue them. The WRIV radio station occupied a modest brick building that had once been a hardware store. Its neon sign flickers periodically in the morning light as Marcus pulls into the parking lot, Alexandra beside him, reviewing her notes one last time. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing her tapping foot. "Terrified," she admitted with a small smile. "Public speaking isn't my forte. That's why I became an urban planner. Drawings don't require speeches." "Just pretend you're talking to Lily," Marcus suggested. "She was hanging on your every word last night." Alexandra's expression softened. "She's a special kid. Makes it easy." Inside, Roy Callahan was adjusting microphones in the broadcast booth, his reading glasses perched precariously on the end of his nose. "Morning, Crusaders," he greeted them. "Ready to wake up Riverbrook?" The morning show had a loyal following, commuters, shop owners and retirees who structured their mornings around Roy's booming voice and local updates. If they wanted to reach the community quickly, this was their platform. "5 minutes until we're live," Roy warned, gesturing to their seats. "Remember, be yourselves. Authentic passion beats polished talking points every time." As Alexandra adjusted her headphones, Marcus noticed her hands trembling slightly. Without thinking, he reached across and squeezed her fingers briefly. "We've got this," he murmured. She looked up, surprise giving way to gratitude. "We do, don't we?" The on-air light glowed red, and Roy launched into his familiar introduction. "Good morning, Riverbrook. It's 8:02 on a beautiful Tuesday, and you're listening to Wake Up with Roy on WRIV. Today, we've got a special treat. 2 guests with a vision for our town that might just change everything." He introduced Marcus first, describing him as the bus driver who knows Riverbrook's heart better than anyone, then Alexandra as the urban planner with family ties and fresh ideas. The framing was perfect, local credibility paired with professional expertise. Alexandra started tentatively, but as Roy guided her through questions about the Millstone project, her natural enthusiasm emerged. She described the phased renovation, the community trust model, and the potential economic impact with clarity and conviction. "So let me get this straight," Roy said, leaning into his microphone. "Instead of another big-box retailer that ships profits out of town, you're proposing local ownership that keeps money circulating in Riverbrook?" "Exactly," Alexandra confirmed. "When residents invest in their downtown, they're not just property owners, they're stakeholders in the community's future." Marcus jumped in to explain how the trust would work, shares available at different investment levels, decision-making rights for all shareholders, regardless of investment size, and profit. Distribution tied to community impact metrics. "Sounds idealistic," Roy challenged, playing devil's advocate. "What about the tax bill? Mayor Richardson claims the properties will be auctioned within the month." Alexandra didn't flinch. "The tax liability is real. $804,620 due in 26 days. It's a substantial hurdle, but not insurmountable with community support." "That's a lot of bake sales," Roy remarked dryly. "It would be," Marcus agreed, "if we were starting from zero." But Alexandra has already committed her personal assets of over $300,000 to the project. We need to raise the remainder. This revelation, which they had strategically held back until now, created the exact impact they'd hoped for. Roy's eyebrows shot up, and he leaned forward intently. "You're putting your own money in first?" he asked Alexandra. "Of course," she replied simply. "I'm asking the community to believe in this vision. I have to demonstrate my own commitment." The conversation shifted after that, with Roy's skepticism giving way to genuine curiosity. When he opened the phone lines, the response was immediate. First came Gary from the hardware store, pledging $5,000 toward the tax bill if the community trust included space for local craftspeople. Then Maria, a retired teacher, offering $2,000 from her savings because my grandchildren deserve a Riverbrook with a future. By the end of the hour-long segment, listeners had pledged over $60,000. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start, and more importantly, it signaled community interest. As they were gathering their notes after the broadcast, Roy's phone rang. His expression grew increasingly serious as he listened. "Understood. Thanks for the heads up," he said before hanging up. "What is it?" Marcus asked, recognizing the concern in Roy's face. That was Linda Martinez. Richardson called an emergency. Town council meeting for 10 a.m. Topic: public safety concerns at abandoned properties. Alexandra's face paled. "He's going to try to have Millstone condemned." "Wouldn't put it past him," Roy agreed grimly. "You've got an hour to get there." They rushed from the station, Marcus driving while Alexandra made frantic phone calls. "Linda's sending a reporter," she reported. "And I've reached out to my structural engineer to testify about the building's condition, if needed." The town hall was already crowded when they arrived, an unusual turnout for a Tuesday morning meeting. Richardson sat at the center of the council table, flanked by 4 council members. His expression tightened when he spotted Marcus and Alexandra entering. "Quite the publicity campaign you've launched," he remarked, as they took seats in the front row. "Creative storytelling about a dangerous eyesore." "The only danger is letting history die, Gordon," Marcus replied evenly. Richardson's retort was cut short as he called the meeting to order. "We've received concerning reports about trespassing and unsafe conditions at the abandoned Millstone building," he announced. "Our building inspector has recommended immediate action to protect public safety." The building inspector, a thin man named Peterson, who also happened to be Richardson's brother-in-law, presented photos of broken windows, water damage, and deteriorating brick. His conclusion: the building posed imminent danger and should be condemned, with demolition the only realistic remedy. When the floor opened for public comments, Alexandra was first to the microphone. "The structural issues Mr. Peterson identified are cosmetic, not foundational," she stated firmly. "I've had 3 independent structural engineers assess the building in the past 6 months. Their reports, which I've submitted to the council, confirm the structure is sound and fully restorable." She presented her own photos, showing the building's solid framework and original architectural features. "What looks like decay to an untrained eye is actually patina, the visible history that makes this building worth saving." As murmurs spread through the audience, Marcus approached the microphone next. "I've been inside that building," he said, making eye contact with each council member. "So have many others in this room. We remember working there, visiting there, seeing it as Riverbrook's heart. Yes, it needs work, but condemning it serves only one purpose: clearing the way for outside developers." Richardson's jaw tightened visibly. "This isn't about development. It's about safety." "Then let's talk safety," came a new voice. Frank Wilson, the former mill worker, stood up from his seat. "I spent 30 years in that building. Know every beam, every corner. It's sturdier than half the new construction in this town. one by one. Community members rose to speak, some who had worked in the mill, others who remembered visiting it as children. Their testimonies painted the millstone not as a dangerous relic, but as a treasured landmark worth preserving. The tide was turning visibly, council members exchanging uncertain glances as public opinion solidified against condemnation. Richardson, sensing defeat, called for a vote on tabling the motion until further assessments could be conducted. 3 in favor of tabling, 2 opposed, he announced tightly. The condemnation order is postponed, pending additional structural evaluation. It wasn't a victory, merely a reprieve. But as people filed out of the meeting, many stopped to express support for Alexandra and Marcus's vision. The morning's radio interview had clearly struck a chord. "That was close," Marcus observed as they walked back to his truck. "Too close." "He's getting desperate," Alexandra agreed, "which means we're gaining momentum." They had just enough time to grab lunch before heading to Riverbrook Middle School for their presentation. The cafeteria was packed with students from both middle and high school classes, their curious faces turning toward the newcomers as they entered. Ms. Collins welcomed them warmly, introducing Alexandra as an urban planner and Marcus as Lily's, a dad who many of you know from the bus route. This earned friendly nods from several students who recognized him. Alexandra had prepared a simplified version of her presentation, focusing on before and after visuals that showcased Millstone's potential transformation. As photographs of the building's current state gave way to architectural renderings of its possible future, audible gasps and murmurs rippled through the young audience. "This isn't just about restoring a building," Alexandra explained, her earlier nervousness replaced by genuine enthusiasm. "It's about reimagining what a small town can be in the 21st century. Not a relic, not a ghost town, but a vibrant center where history and innovation coexist." Marcus then outlined how the community trust would function, translating complex financial concepts into terms the students could understand. "Think of it like a community garden," he suggested. "Everyone contributes what they can, time, money, skills, and everyone benefits from the harvest." The questions that followed revealed surprising sophistication from the students. They asked about environmental sustainability, accessibility features, and how teenagers like themselves could participate. "What if we don't have money to invest?" asked a serious-faced high school student. "How can kids help?" "Ideas," Alexandra replied without hesitation. "Fresh perspectives. Your generation sees possibilities that mine might miss." She gestured to the renderings. "These designs need your input. What would make this space work for you? What's missing that would draw you downtown?" This invitation unleashed a torrent of suggestions. A technology lab where students could access equipment their families couldn't afford. Performance spaces for local musicians, affordable food options, even a rooftop garden maintained by the school's environmental club. Ms. Collins had prepared worksheets where students could sketch their ideas for specific areas of the millstone. The energy in the room was electric as they broke into groups, bending over tables to draw and debate. "They get it," Marcus said quietly to Alexandra as they observed the activity. "They understand what's at stake." "Because it's their future we're talking about," she replied. "They'll be the ones living with whatever happens to Riverbrook long after we're gone." As the session wound down, Ms. Collins made an unexpected announcement. "After hearing today's presentation, our student council has voted to dedicate the proceeds from next week's Fall Festival to the Millstone Community Trust. Additionally, they're organizing a Memories of the Millstone oral history project to collect stories from family members who worked there." The students cheered, and Lily shot her father a thumbs up from across the room. Something shifted in Marcus's chest, a surge of pride mingled with hope. These kids weren't resigned to Riverbrook's decline, they were ready to fight for its renewal. As they gathered their materials, the high school economics teacher approached. "I'd like to offer my students assistance with your community investment model," he said. "They could help prepare presentation materials, maybe even a simplified prospectus for potential investors." "That would be incredibly helpful," Alexandra said gratefully. "We need all the support we can get." The afternoon snowballed from there. Linda Martinez's article hit the Gazette's website, featuring photographs of the millstone's interior alongside Alexandra's architectural renderings. Roy posted the radio interview online, where it was rapidly shared across social media. By late afternoon, Alexandra's phone was buzzing constantly with emails and calls from interested community members. They set up impromptu headquarters in the back room of the Riverside Diner, where Chris Martinez offered them free coffee and a space to meet with potential investors. Throughout the evening, a steady stream of townspeople arrived, some curious, some skeptical, all engaged. Frank Wilson brought 5 former mill workers who collectively pledged $25,000. The owner of the local grocery store committed $10,000 and offered to host information sessions for his customers. Even Doris Wheeler from the library stopped by, bringing historical photographs and a check for $5,000 from the Historical Society's Preservation Fund. By closing time, they had secured pledges totaling nearly $150,000, impressive for a day's work, but still far short of their goal. "It's a marathon, not a sprint," Marcus reminded Alexandra as they tallied the day's commitments. "We've got 25 days left. And nearly $350,000 still to raise," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Even with my contribution, we're cutting it close." Chris approached their table with fresh coffee. "You two should call it a day. You look exhausted." As they gathered their materials, the diner's door swung open. Mayor Richardson entered alone this time, his expression unreadable as he approached their table. "Quite the grassroots campaign you've launched," he remarked, refusing Chris's offer of coffee. "Impressive, if misguided." "What do you want, Gordon?" Marcus asked wearily. "To offer some friendly advice." Richardson adjusted his tie. "Westfield's original offer for the Harlow properties was $1.2 million. They've authorized me to increase it to $1.5 million, enough to cover the tax bill, with a healthy profit for Ms. Harlow." Alexandra looked up sharply. "You're their broker now?" "I'm a pragmatist," Richardson replied smoothly. "Your community trust is a lovely concept, but you're not going to raise $800,000 in 25 days. Not in a town where the median household income is $42,000. We've already secured over $400,000, Marcus countered, including Alexandra's contribution in the total. "The community believes in this." "Belief doesn't pay tax bills," Richardson said. "Take the offer, Alexandra. Walk away with a profit instead of a failure." "This isn't about profit," she replied coolly. "If it were, I'd have sold it months ago." Richardson's facade of civility slipped. "Then what is it about? Easing your family's guilty conscience? Using Riverbrook for your personal redemption project?" The accusation struck a nerve. Alexandra's composure wavered momentarily before she responded. "This is about fulfilling a promise to my father, to this town, and now to the people who've trusted us with their hopes and savings." "Noble sentiments," Richardson scoffed. "I'll give you 48 hours to reconsider. After that, Westfield's moving on to other opportunities." After he departed, Alexandra slumped in her chair. "What if he's right? What if we're giving people false hope?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "When Emily was diagnosed," he said after a moment, "the doctors gave us a 10% chance. We took it because hope, even unlikely hope, was better than surrender." He reached for her hand across the table. "I'd rather try and fail than wonder what might have been possible." Alexandra's fingers tightened around his. "Me too." As they left the diner, the town was quieter than usual. Shops closed for the evening, streetlights casting pools of gold on empty sidewalks. They paused in front of the Millstone building, its darkened silhouette looming against the night sky. "Sometimes I think I can hear it breathing," Alexandra said softly. Like it's just waiting for someone to remember it's alive. Marcus understood. The sentiment exactly. The building wasn't just brick and timber. It was a vessel for memories, for history, for the town's identity. And standing beside Alexandra in the October chill, he felt something else awakening too. Parts of himself that had been dormant since Emily's death. "Stay with me tonight," Alexandra said suddenly, then blushed at his startled expression. "Not like that. It's just, I have an idea I want to work on, and I could use your perspective. We could pull an all-nighter like college students." Marcus hesitated, thinking of Lily. "Let me call my neighbor. If she can stay with Lily, I'm in." An hour later, they were spread across the floor of Alexandra's living room, surrounded by architectural drawings, financial projections, and takeout. Containers from the Chinese restaurant on the edge of town. Alexandra had changed into sweatpants and a Harvard t-shirt, her hair piled messily atop her head. Marcus had rolled up his sleeves and loosened his collar, comfort superseding formality, as they worked. "Okay, here's my idea," Alexandra said, pushing aside empty cartons to make space for a fresh sheet of paper. "We've been thinking too conventionally about the funding. Traditional investments, donations, pledges, but what if we create something more immediate, a community event to galvanize support? Like a fundraiser? Bigger, more symbolic." Her eyes lit up as she sketched rapidly. "A Reclaim the Millstone Day. We open the building for guided tours, set up stations showing the renovation plans, have former workers share stories, food trucks, local musicians, children's activities. A block party with a purpose," Marcus nodded, warming to the concept. "Let people physically reconnect with the building." "Exactly, and we sell symbolic shares on the spot, certificates representing future ownership stakes once the trust is formalized. Different levels, different benefits, but all conveying the same message: this belongs to all of us." They worked through the night, transforming the idea into a detailed plan. They drafted event layouts, volunteer assignments, marketing strategies. Alexandra created mock-ups of the share certificates, while Marcus compiled lists of local vendors who might participate. As dawn broke, casting pink light through the windows, they sat back to survey their work, dozens of pages covering every aspect of what they now called Millstone Day, scheduled for that Saturday. 3 days to pull this together," Marcus murmured, rubbing his tired eyes. "Are we crazy?" "Absolutely," Alexandra laughed, the sound bright in the morning quiet. "But the best ideas usually are." They looked at each other across the paper-strewn floor, exhaustion and exhilaration mingling in their expressions. Something had shifted during the night, their partnership deepening into a connection that transcended the project itself. "Thank you," Alexandra said softly, "for believing in this. For believing in me." Marcus reached across the scattered papers and took her hand. "Thank you for giving Riverbrook something to believe in again." The moment stretched between them, weighted with possibility. Then Alexandra's phone rang, Roy Callahan calling about their radio spot for the event. The spell broke as they plunged back into planning mode, but something had changed. A threshold had been crossed, though neither had quite named it yet. As Marcus drove home to shower and change before picking up Lily for school, he found himself humming again, not just a momentary lapse, but a continuous melody that felt like it might have always been there, waiting to resurface. Riverbrook looked different this morning, not because anything had physically changed, but because he was seeing it through new eyes. Not as a town trapped in decline, but as a community on the verge of revival, just as he was himself. Richardson's threat hung over their plans, and the tax deadline loomed ever closer. Yet for the first time in years, Marcus felt truly awake, truly present, truly hopeful about tomorrow. Whatever happened with the millstone, with Alexandra, with Riverbrook itself, something important had already been restored. Dawn broke over Riverbrook on Saturday with unusual clarity, the sky a perfect autumn blue, the air crisp with anticipation. Marcus stood at his kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the distant hills in gold. 3 days of frantic preparation had led to this moment. Millstone Day. Across town, 50 volunteers were already gathering, ready to transform the abandoned building into a showcase of possibility. Linda Martinez's special edition of the Gazette had hit doorsteps an hour ago, featuring front-page coverage of the community trust proposal. Roy Callahan's morning broadcast was being aired live from the millstone's front steps. This was a moment, either the beginning of Riverbrook's revival or the final chapter of a well-intentioned failure. "Dad, we're going to be late." Lily called from the hallway, already dressed in the Save the Millstone t-shirt that Alexandra had rush-ordered for volunteers. Her enthusiasm had been contagious, recruiting a dozen of her classmates to help with the children's activities. "Coming?" "Kiddo," Marcus replied, draining his coffee and grabbing his jacket. The weight of Richardson's 48-hour deadline, now expired, hung in the back of his mind, but he pushed it aside. Today wasn't about obstacles. It was about opportunity. Downtown was transformed. Colorful banners stretched across Main Street. Storefronts displayed historical photographs of the millstone in its heyday. Even shops that had been vacant for years had been temporarily reclaimed, their windows showcasing architectural renderings and community trust information. As they approached the millstone, Marcus was stunned by the metamorphosis. The chain-link fence had been decorated with children's artwork depicting their visions for the building's future. The boarded main entrance had been replaced with temporary glass doors, allowing visitors to see into the dramatically lit main floor. String lights zigzagged overhead across the street, creating a festive atmosphere despite the morning chill. Alexandra stood at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, directing volunteers with calm authority. When she spotted Marcus and Lily, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart skip. "You made it," she said, rushing over. She looked different today, confident, energized, her usual reserve replaced by open excitement. "What do you think?" "It's incredible," Marcus replied honestly. "I can't believe you pulled this together in 3 days. "We pulled it together," she corrected, including Lily in her smile. "This has been the definition of community effort." The evidence was all around them. Chris Martinez had set up a coffee stand by the entrance, the proceeds going to the trust fund. Doris Wheeler had organized a historical exhibit in what had once been the mill's lobby, featuring artifacts and photographs documenting the building's century-long history. Frank Wilson and other former workers had created a guided tour highlighting original architectural features and sharing personal memories. Even the high school's robotics club had contributed, creating a digital 3D model of the renovated building that visitors could explore through virtual reality headsets. "The first tour starts in 30 minutes, Alexandra said, checking her watch. "We've already got a crowd forming." Indeed, a line had begun to snake down the block. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers, faces both familiar and new. Marcus recognized not just Riverbrook residents, but people from neighboring towns as well. "Roy's broadcast is reaching beyond our borders," Alexandra explained, following his gaze. "We've had calls from Millfield, Springvale, even Portland." Before Marcus could respond, Roy himself approached, microphone in hand. "Mind if I steal you? 2 for a live interview? The people want to hear from the visionaries behind today's event." As they followed Roy to his broadcast setup, Lily tugged at Marcus's sleeve. "Dad, look," she whispered, pointing toward the end of the block where a sleek black SUV had parked. Mayor Richardson emerged, accompanied by 2 men in suits, the Westfield representatives they'd seen at the diner. "They're here to observe," Alexandra murmured, having noticed them too. Let them see what they're up against. The interview with Roy was brief but powerful, Alexandra articulating their vision with passionate clarity, while Marcus emphasized the community's stake in the outcome. Today isn't just about raising funds, he explained. It's about reclaiming our town's identity and future. As they concluded, Roy announced that the morning's pledges had already reached $15,000, a promising start, though still far from their goal. The doors opened at 10 a.m. sharp, and the crowd poured in with palpable excitement. Marcus took his position leading tours of the upper floors, while Alexandra stationed herself at the information center in the main hall, explaining the community trust model to interested investors. Throughout the morning, Marcus watched the transformation happening not just in the building, but in the people exploring it. Skepticism gave way to curiosity, then to excitement, as they began to see the millstone not as a relic, but as a canvas for possibility. "I remember when this was the payroll office," an elderly woman told him, pointing to what was now an empty room with peeling paint. "My Harry would come home with his envelope every Friday, so proud of providing for us." She studied the architectural rendering, showing the space converted to a senior activity center. He would have liked this. He always said buildings should have purposes, not just histories. By noon, the main floor was packed. Food trucks lined the street outside. Local musicians played from a small stage, set up in what had once been the shipping area, and the sound of conversations, laughter, and occasional applause filled the cavernous space. Lily found Marcus between tours, her face flushed with excitement. "Dad, we've already sold over 100 kid shares." She held up a colorfully designed certificate that had been created for younger participants. "Ms. Harlow said we've raised almost $35,000 just this morning." It was impressive, but Marcus did the mental math. Even with the morning's success, they remained far short of their goal. Time was running out, both for the day's event and for the tax deadline now just 22 days away. As he prepared to lead another tour group, Marcus noticed Richardson and the Westfield representative speaking with Alexandra near the information center. Her expression remained composed, but he recognized the tension in her posture. Without thinking, he changed course to join them. "Marcus," Richardson greeted him with artificial warmth. "Quite the spectacle you've organized. Admirable community spirit." "Thank you," Marcus replied evenly. "Riverbrook knows how to rally around something that matters." "Indeed. Though I wonder if they fully understand the economics at play." Richardson gestured to one of his companions. "Mr. Everett here was just explaining to Ms. Harlow that Westfield's offer expires at midnight. After that, they're moving on to other opportunities." "We wish you success," Everett added smoothly, "but our investors require certainty. The market doesn't wait for sentiment." Alexandra's reply was interrupted by a commotion at the front entrance. All heads turned to see a familiar figure making his way through the crowd. Thomas Jenkins, Riverbrook's wealthiest resident and notorious recluse. The elderly man moved slowly, supported by a carved wooden cane, but his presence commanded attention. Jenkins had made his fortune in manufacturing before retiring to Riverbrook 15 years ago. He rarely participated in town events, preferring the solitude of his estate on the outskirts of town. His appearance at the millstone caused a ripple of whispers throughout the hall. "Mr. Jenkins!" Richardson recovered first, hurrying to greet him. "What an unexpected pleasure!" Jenkins ignored the mayor, his faded blue eyes scanning the transformed space with inscrutable interest. Finally, his gaze settled on Alexandra. "You must be Robert Harlow's daughter." "I am," she confirmed, extending her hand. "Alexandra Harlow, thank you for coming, Mr. Jenkins." "I knew your father," Jenkins said, accepting her handshake with surprising strength. "Decent man. Only Harlow understood that a business isn't just balance sheets." He looked around again. "Heard about what you're trying to do here. Wanted to see for myself." "Would you like a tour?" Alexandra offered. We'd be honored to show you our vision for the building. Jenkins nodded, and Richardson immediately attempted to insert himself as guide. I'd be happy to explain our development options. Not from you, Jenkins cut him off bluntly. I want to hear from them. He gestured to Alexandra and Marcus, the ones who believe in something beyond profits. For the next hour, they escorted Jenkins through the building, explaining not just the renovation plans, but the community trust model and their vision for Riverbrook's revitalization. The elderly man asked penetrating questions about financials, sustainability and governance, revealing a sharp mind behind his weathered appearance. In the top-floor room with the workers' signatures, Jenkins paused, studying the wall intently. My father's name is here, he said quietly, pointing to a faded signature from 1937. Started as a floor sweep, ended as a shift supervisor. Paid for my college education with his mill wages. He turned to face them, leaning heavily on his cane. I've been watching Riverbrook die for 20 years. Thought it was inevitable. Small towns aren't meant to survive in the modern economy. His gaze moved between Alexandra and Marcus. Maybe I was wrong. When they returned to the main floor, the crowd had grown even larger. Roy Callahan announced that the day's pledges had reached $82,000. Impressive, but still far short of what they needed. Jenkins listened to the announcement, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Alexandra. How much are you still short for the tax bill? She hesitated only briefly. With today's pledges and my personal contribution, about $320,000. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. And if that bill were paid, what would you need to begin Phase 1 renovation? Approximately $1.2 million, Alexandra replied. We have preliminary approval for a construction loan, but it's contingent on resolving the tax liability. Jenkins absorbed this information in silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, he made his way to Roy's microphone station and gestured for the broadcaster's attention. May I? He asked, indicating the microphone. Roy, clearly stunned, handed it over. A hush fell over the crowd as Jenkins tapped the microphone once, the sound echoing through the vast space. I'm not one for speeches, he began, his voice stronger than his frail appearance suggested. But I am one for investments. Good investments. He surveyed the assembled crowd. My father worked in this building for 42 years, never missed a day. When I succeeded in business, he told me that profit without purpose is a poor legacy. Jenkins paused, his gaze finding Alexandra and Marcus in the crowd. Today I've seen purpose. I've seen the community. I've seen what Riverbrook could be again. Another pause. The Jenkins Foundation will contribute $500,000 to the Millstone Community Trust, half as a direct grant for tax resolution, half as a matching fund for community investments in the renovation. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Alexandra's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Marcus felt momentarily dizzy, the implications of Jenkins' announcement washing over him like a wave. With one condition, Jenkins continued when the noise subsided. The trust must be governed democratically, with representation from all segments of the community. This building belongs to Riverbrook, past, present, and future. As Jenkins stepped away from the microphone, Richardson's face had lost all color. The Westfield representatives conferred urgently in the corner, clearly recognizing that their opportunity was evaporating. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. News of Jenkins' contributions spread rapidly, catalyzing a fresh wave of community pledges. By closing time at 6 p.m., they had secured enough commitments to not only cover the tax bill, but begin planning the first phase of renovation. As volunteers began cleaning up, Alexandra found Marcus sitting alone on the main staircase, watching the transformed space with quiet wonder. We did it, she said softly, settling beside him. Actually, truly did it. Jenkins was the miracle we needed, Marcus acknowledged. But it wouldn't have happened without everything that came before: the radio interview, the school presentation, today's event. We created the conditions for that miracle. Alexandra leaned against his shoulder, fatigue and elation mingling in her posture. I keep thinking about that first day at the bus stop. If you hadn't noticed me crying, if you hadn't stopped. I've been noticing you longer than you think, Marcus admitted. 5 days before I stopped, actually. I just didn't have the courage to say anything. She turned to face him, surprise and something warmer in her expression. Really? Why not? Marcus shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Single dad, bus driver, stuck in a routine. What could I possibly offer someone like you? How about everything that matters? Alexandra replied, her voice soft but certain. Integrity, kindness, the courage to believe in something, in someone, when others wouldn't. The moment between them trembled with possibility. Then, with the simplicity of something long overdue, Alexandra leaned forward and kissed him. Brief, gentle, a question as much as a statement. Marcus answered by drawing her closer, his hand cradling her face as he returned the kiss, with 5 years of dormant feeling awakening all at once. When they separated, both slightly breathless, a small voice from the bottom of the stairs said, "Finally." They turned to see Lily standing there, grinning widely. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in a closet or something." Alexandra laughed, blushing but not moving away from Marcus. "Your daughter is frighteningly perceptive, and surprisingly sneaky," Marcus added, though he couldn't summon any real disapproval. Lily climbed the stairs to join them, settling on Alexandra's other side. "Does this mean you're staying in Riverbrook?" she asked. "No more crying at bus stops?" Alexandra looked at Marcus, then back to Lily. "I think I found something better than a bus stop," she said softly. "I found a home." 1 year later, the autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh paint and sawdust as Marcus crossed Main Street toward the Millstone building. The transformation was remarkable. Restored windows gleamed in the morning sun, the brick facade had been meticulously repointed, and a new sign hung above the entrance. Millstone Commons, founded by community, built for community. Inside, workers were putting finishing touches on the ground floor spaces. The central atrium soared 3 stories, flooding the interior with natural light. Around the perimeter, small storefronts were taking shape, some already leased to local businesses eager to be part of Riverbrook's renaissance. "Mr. Reynolds," called Miguel, the construction foreman. "Ms. Harlow's looking for you. Said she'd be in the community room." Marcus thanked him and made his way through the bustling space. The past year had been a whirlwind of activity, establishing the legal framework for the trust, securing permits, beginning construction. There had been setbacks and challenges, but with Jenkins' support and the community's growing investment, they had overcome each obstacle. Richardson had resigned as mayor 3 months ago, citing personal reasons that everyone knew involved the FBI investigation into his financial relationships with several development companies. Westfield had quietly withdrawn their interest in Riverbrook, focusing on easier targets elsewhere. The community room occupied what had once been the mill's central office, a large, airy space with tall windows overlooking the river that had powered the original millstone centuries ago. Alexandra stood at one of these windows, deep in conversation with Doris Wheeler and Thomas Jenkins. She looked up as Marcus entered, her face brightening. "Perfect timing," she called. "We're just finalizing the dedication ceremony agenda." The grand opening was scheduled for Saturday, exactly 1 year after their impromptu Millstone Day had changed everything. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a building had evolved into a model for community-led development that was drawing attention from towns across the state. "I was thinking," Jenkins said as Marcus joined them, "that we should acknowledge where this all began. The elderly man's health had improved over the past year, his involvement with the Millstone project seeming to revitalize him as much as the town. That bus stop where Alexandra used to sit, perhaps a small plaque. Alexandra laughed, slipping her arm through Marcus's. I'm not sure my tearful vigils deserve commemoration. Disagree, Marcus replied, kissing her temple lightly. Best route. I ever drove. Their relationship had deepened steadily over the past year, moving at a pace that felt right for both of them, and for Lily, who had appointed herself chief supporter of their romance. Alexandra had sold the Harlow estate 6 months ago, using the proceeds to establish a scholarship fund for Riverbrook graduates. She now shared the small but warm house on Oak Street with Marcus and Lily, the three of them creating a family none had expected to find. As the others continued discussing ceremony details, Marcus gazed around the room, marveling at how much had changed. The Millstone's revival had catalyzed other transformations throughout Riverbrook. Vacant storefronts on Main Street were gradually filling with new businesses. The community trust model had expanded to include other historical properties. Young families were moving in, attracted by affordable housing and the town's renewed vibrancy. Penny for your thoughts? Alexandra asked, joining him by the window after Jenkins and Doris departed. Just thinking about bus routes, Marcus replied with a smile. How one small deviation can change everything. Alexandra leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. I'm glad you stopped that day. I'm glad you were crying at my bus. Stop! Technically, I was crying at the tax bill, she corrected with a laugh, but I'm glad it brought you to me. Outside, Riverbrook was awakening to another day. Shopkeepers raising awnings, students walking to school, construction crews, arriving at renovation sites throughout downtown. The town wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, reinventing itself while honoring its past. And at the heart of it all stood the Millstone, no longer abandoned, no longer a symbol of loss, but a testament to what could happen when one woman's tears became the catalyst for a community's rebirth. And when one man had the courage to ask why she was crying, as they stood together in the golden morning light, watching their town come alive around them, both knew they had found something precious and unexpected. A second chance, not just for a building or a town, but for themselves, proof that even in the most unlikely places, like a bus stop on an ordinary autumn morning, life could begin again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.